Chapter 3, Close and Special. During my lifetime, I have been blessed by ever so many friends. They run the gamut from those I stop on the street to chat with to those who visit my home and are close confidants. When I look closely at the names and numbers, I am touched. But it soon becomes clear that there is a small inner circle of friends who became very important in my life. What follows here are those very special friends. This is not to lessen all those unnamed and important other friends. Orly C was a professional concert violinist. Before coming to Oakland, he was a professor in the music department of a small college in Missouri. Adelaide, his wife, a gifted pianist, often accompanied her husband in recitals or concerts. They had no children and, in a sense, adopted me. Through their eyes, influence, and instruction, they revealed a whole new, beautiful world that I had never known before. For at least 10 years, the C's taught me, loved me, and introduced me to a brand new, exciting world. They urged me to attend the university, and I must add that they were the only family or friends to attend my graduation. The C's introduced me to the professional strings of the San Francisco Symphony and the world of musical soirees. Orly C planted the seed that grew into self-esteem. Through them, I felt comfortable with the Bay Area musical elite. I wonder what would have happened to me had I never become a violin student of Orly C. Probably just a lace-curtain Irish girl married to a handsome, unshaven laborer and having 7 or 8 kids. Orly C organized and conducted the Oakland Symphony Orchestra, which today is a prestigious ensemble. Perhaps 15 years after I'd begun my own life in Dunsmuir, Orly C's life ended suddenly. At the conclusion of a triumphant performance of his symphony, he acknowledged the acclaim of the audience, walked off the stage, and dropped dead. Helen Robart and her mother meant playtime for me during my college years. What I mean about playtime is simply this. Sunday afternoons, Helen and I dressed in our prettiest outfits just as though we were going to the Waldorf for tea. Once ready, I walked to the Robart apartment not too far away. Mrs. Robart brought her box camera and lots of film each time we went to the park. There we posed for pictures, hoping to resemble our favorite movie stars. Helen remained a good and solid friend. Eleanor Harrison, née Van Fossen, was a member of one of the founding families of Dunsmuir, Levi Van Fossen. He had 2 children, Frank and Vera. Frank was Eleanor's father, a very gracious, outgoing gentleman. Many times when I was invited to their spacious, lovely home, before I was married and after too, Frank would call from his easy chair, "Pull up your chair, kick off your shoes, and toast your tootsies by the fire." The warmth was emanating from huge burning logs in an enormous fireplace, large enough for Santa Claus to stand up in it. May Van Fossen, Eleanor's mother, was very possessive. I often wondered how she even allowed Eleanor to attend Stanford University in Palo Alto. Eleanor did not graduate for some reason not known to me. She quit college in the last semester of her senior year. Eleanor had a steady boyfriend. They were almost engaged, but both of the mothers constantly interfered, and eventually he moved away. Many years later, Eleanor did marry a business associate, George Harrison. The Van Fossen women were cornerstones in the high society in Dunsmuir. Oh, yes, one existed right here in this little railroad town. Through Eleanor and her mother, I met all the ladies whose husbands held important positions in town, such as the Southern Pacific Superintendent or the President of the Bank of Dunsmuir. I learned finishing touches on social graces from Eleanor. Under Orly C, my self-confidence had begun to blossom. Then knowing and being with Eleanor, it continued to grow. I had many friends, but Eleanor Van Fossen was my very closest. Ralph Wattenberger, a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, became a member of the Dunsmuir High School faculty in 1927, the second year of my teaching there. He coached the sports, football, basketball, baseball, and taught classes in history. For 3 years, he earned the respect of the students. In the early 30s, he returned to Dunsmuir High School as its superintendent and principal, and he continued to coach basketball and baseball. Through their avid interest in sports, Burton and Ralph were friends from their first meeting. Esther, Ralph's bride of 1927, and I became good friends too. The Wattenbergers had a car which they drove to all of Ralph's basketball or baseball games, as well as some overnight trips to places like Mount Lassen Park. Ralph and Esther always took Burton and me on those jaunts. Ralph and Esther had no children, and in a way, they adopted our children. Ralph claimed them as their own, for he spent much time down on the floor playing with Alice Jane, Bobby, and Barbara. We were engulfed in the Great Depression. Having been married, I was no longer teaching at the high school. In those days, married women were not allowed to teach. Burton never lost his job with the Southern Pacific as a clerk, so we had a steady income, slim, but sufficient to maintain our home. There was not a penny for such things as Christmas gifts unless they could be made of materials already on hand. The Wattenbergers saw to it that Santa brought lots of toys for our little ones. Their loving generosity hurt just a little because Burton and I could not. There were many times when Ralph and Esther would take the children for a drive, and once to the Barnum and Bailey Circus. When away and knowing they were in good hands, I would catch up on housework long overdue and maybe sometimes a little rest. One Thanksgiving holiday, the Wattenbergers went home to Berkeley. On Sunday evening after the holiday, Esther phoned saying, "Come on down, we have something to show you." We bundled up the children. Barbsy was 2.5 or 3. As we walked down, I said, "I bet it's a fur coat." When we knocked on the door, it was opened quickly. Surprise! There stood Esther holding a baby, and Ralph almost holding Esther and the baby. Smiling broadly, Ralph announced proudly, "Alice Jane, Bobby, Barbara, this is Carolyn, just like your sister." They had adopted the baby. The Wattenbergers helped me settle into married life, but also kept me in touch with the high school faculty. This contact kept alive within me my love of teaching. Their friendship and love kept me from feeling that being a housewife was drudgery. They kept alive my yearning to return someday to teach English, music, and drama. When World War II broke out, and married women could again teach because men were in the military service, Ralph hired me to teach again at Dunsmuir High School in 1942. That year I taught home economics and art because I had some talents in those areas. The next year I was teaching English, music, and drama. Minnie Lockhart, my children's beloved Aunt Minnie, lived just across Beverly Way from us. The driveway circled up a hill to the J.R. Ehrenman home, which had a screened porch the entire length of the front of the house. Minnie, a recent widow with 2 little boys, one an infant, was a sister of Jake Ehrenman's wife. During the Spanish influenza scourge, she contracted the flu and died just a few days after giving birth to a baby girl. In 1917, the medical world knew next to nothing about the new killer disease. Jake had to employ 3 nurses for 8-hour shifts at his home. After a few months, he wrote to his sister-in-law asking if she would consider moving west to become mother to his baby, Martha, and in exchange he would become father to her boys. She agreed to the arrangement. It had been in place for about 12 years before Burton and I moved into our brand new home. Happily, Minnie came into my life. No, our lives. Here I was, a new mother who never had cared for a baby before and knew next to nothing about housekeeping, cooking, planning meals, washing and ironing, house cleaning. Whenever I cried, "Help!" Minnie came down the hill and told me how to do all these many things. It was she who told Burton he must put up a clothesline from the back of the house to a large cherry tree at the end of our property. It was Minnie who dropped whatever she was doing to come down when I told her Alice Jane was crying continuously and I didn't know what to do. Aunt Minnie did. It was she who taught me how to can my cherries and subsequently all other food items I wanted to preserve. Minnie invited me to attend the Methodist church with her. Through her kindness and love, I joined the Methodist church in 1937. It was there that our children were baptized by Reverend Tom Cuddy. Minnie Lockhart was a wonderful surrogate mother, my own mother having passed away 4 years earlier. Mamie Poe came into my life in 1952. Her husband, Delwyn Poe, was the superintendent principal of Dunsmuir High School. I was chairperson of the English department and director of choral music in the plays. The Poes lived on Beverly Way, just 3 houses south of the Coon home. We became very good friends, for I discovered the 3 of us had a love of all kinds of music. Both had always sung in a church choir, and I directed group singing, so we all enjoyed choral music. In September, when I called the singers to get in harness and meet with me on Thursday nights, I discovered Del had a beautiful tenor voice. Mamie sang also, not a soloist, but she sang well. We, all the choir, reveled in the 4-part songs we learned for performances on Sunday mornings. These rehearsals warmed my heart. The Poes were wonderful neighbors in every sense of that word. In many ways, far too numerous to mention, Mamie was a very real part of my life, professional, home, church. October 14th was a dazzlingly colorful autumn day with its fall leaves, more beautiful than they had been for many years. On that afternoon, while Burton was intent on a World Series baseball game, the grim Reaper snatched him away. Relaxed in his chair, my husband looked as though he was asleep, but I knew he was gone. Frantically, I phoned Dr. Bill Reynolds' mother to alert her about my need to reach the doctor. She phoned him, and though it was Sunday, he came immediately. When he could detect no vital signs, he called the coroner, who came in record time. I'm sure Mamie and Del were in their garden raking leaves when they saw the coroner's car. Immediately, she rushed over and stayed with me almost without relief until Alice, Jane, and Bob arrived from Livermore about 5 hours later. I was numb, immersed in shock and grief. Mamie rubbed my neck and soothingly murmured softly to me. Finally, she brought in a glass of scotch and said, "Drink this. It'll help." I could not have answered the coroner's endless questions had it not been for Mamie. The Poe's daughter, Kathy, was called to come over, and she, among other quiet little things, continually brushed my hair. In my darkest hour, Mamie was with me. It was not the only time, but that October 14th, 1973, is deeply etched in my memory, and Mamie Poe is there. Grace Harris, whom I knew when she first came to Dunsmuir in 1939, was fresh out of the University of California at Berkeley. She was eager to start teaching. When Grace married Bob Harris, we began to see more of one another, for our men played and loved baseball. When our country became involved in World War II, I returned to teach at Dunsmuir High School. Grace and I were always good friends, but when I began beating the drum, alerting Dunsmuir to a forthcoming centennial and a possible celebration, she and I were together much of the time. She was one of a dedicated committee, and before long accepted the position of treasurer. We were in contact personally or by phone, talking of plans and hopes and desires, and the need for money. However, after the committee asked me to create a book, Grace and I were constantly together. Both of us were widows. She had a car. I did not drive. So Grace became all in one, my friend, my confidant, my treasurer, and my chauffeur, driving us frequently to Red Bluff for conferences with the publisher. In a sense, Grace paved the way for me to write books, the first about Dunsmuir, and the other about the ingredients of a full life like mine. Harriet and Carl Alto were just like my son and daughter, so I called them my other kids, M-O-K. In my 90s and living alone, I frequently called them for help in doing some job I could not do by myself, or just to listen when I needed to talk. They were the ones who drove me to the doctor's appointments or special events. When Harriet became so involved in the development of the Dunsmuir Botanical Garden, she would phone at least once a week and still found the time to drop in to check on me. Bev Minneth is a surrogate daughter, keeping me in touch with the outside world or just dropping by to chat with me, or bringing me a sample of some new recipe she'd just tried. Her son Steve is like my grandson and is Mr. Fix-It for me. No matter what, he can make it right and enjoys doing so. Bless his wife, Jeannie, for allowing Steve to spend time helping me. Barbara Shepherd came into my life when I was well into my 90s. Learning that my eyesight was so poor that I, an avid reader once upon a time, could read only words in large print, she offered to come weekly and read to me. Since she began, she has read 13 full-length books. 3 of them were Tale of Two Cities, Oliver Twist, and Great Expectations, all by the amazing Charles Dickens. We enjoy fiction, nonfiction, science, and autobiography. Reading and listening were only part of the afternoon menu. In the 3 hours we were together, we talked about community affairs, philosophy, or bemoaning the involvement in Iraq and the woeful state of affairs in the world. Barbara Shepherd is my new heart and soul friend. What a tangled web of tapestry threads, all the people whose lives mingled with mine. The weaving continues, pulling threads, different colors, thickness. It amazes me as I start to see a lovely order develop under, over, pull, push,